Kouri Richins, the Utah mom of three who allegedly poisoned her husband with fentanyl to get his money, is finally having her preliminary hearing. And our cameras are there as the prosecution shows the court why this case needs to go to trial. We're breaking down the top moments from day one for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. It's been years since now 34-year-old Kouri Richins found her husband, 39-year-old Eric Richins, dead in their bedroom near Park City, Utah. Richins has always maintained her innocence, swearing she has nothing to do with Eric's death, but prosecutors say she slipped 5 times the lethal amount of fentanyl into his Moscow mule in March of 2022. And what makes this case very unique and what caught the attention of many people and the media is that Richins wrote a children's book about grief after Eric's death, even went on a local news station to promote it. This was before she was ultimately arrested. Now her case is finally having its preliminary hearing. After so much time, after a defense team switch-up, hearings over alleged prosecutorial misconduct, a fight over the victim's estate. Now, a preliminary hearing is where the prosecution has the burden to prove, through evidence, that probable cause exists that the defendant committed the crime in order to bound the defendant over to trial. Relatively low standard. In my opinion, in this case, given all the evidence that has been put forward by the prosecution that we've heard so far in the reporting, financial transactions, crime scene data, key witness, I believe that there is enough here, enough evidence to move forward. Now, the defense in a preliminary hearing has the opportunity to challenge the evidence. They can cross-examine witnesses. They can call their own witnesses. But stepping back for a second, things really went off the rails back in May when the defense team announced that they would be objecting to all of the prosecution's planned exhibits. And the prosecutor said he'd had no advance warning that he was going to have to argue whether every single one of his exhibits was admissible. You know, sometimes there's an agreement between the parties, stipulations that things can come in. So the hearing was delayed. And then just days later, Sky Lazaro, the lead attorney on Kouri's team, someone we have interviewed before here on Sidebar, filed a motion to withdraw from the case. Now, the specific details of that weren't given, but it sounds like there may have been some sort of conflict. So a new defense team got up to speed on the case, history, evidence. They came prepared this week to argue against Richins going to trial. And Richins herself has been locked up without bond since her arrest, which came a year after the murder in May of 2023. And she's facing multiple charges, including aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, distribution of a controlled substance, insurance fraud, forgery, and there's more. The state says that Kouri Richins killed Eric because of money, to get to his substantial financial holdings, that Eric had recently cut her out of his will. Richins had took out life insurance policies on Eric without him knowing. He was reportedly consulting with a divorce attorney. There's an allegation that Richins had been having an affair with a handyman. And by the way, Richins was reportedly in financial trouble thanks to this huge purchase of a multi-million-dollar Utah home that was never completed, and Kouri seemingly wanted to flip the home, but Eric was against it. And this wasn't the first time that Richins had allegedly poisoned or tried to poison her husband. No, the Valentine's Day before his death, Richins allegedly gave Eric a sandwich and he immediately broke out into hives, had trouble breathing. That's part of the charges that Richins currently faces. Also, during a vacation in Greece, Richins allegedly gave Eric a drink and he became violently ill. And this is all important for another reason too, because Eric allegedly told his family at one point, quote, "If something happens to me, check out Kouri." So, we want to talk about 3 major witnesses that testified on Monday in this preliminary hearing. The lead detective on the case, a cell phone expert, and a financial expert. Now, the hearing is expected to last at least 2 days, as multiple witnesses are expected to testify. Again, it's kind of like a mini trial. So the hearing started out with Detective Jeff O'Driscoll with the Summit County Sheriff's Office on the stand. He's already testified at Richins' detention hearing, and the court didn't really want to waste time repeating all of that, so the defense was up first to cross-examine him on what he had to say during that prior testimony. And Detective O'Driscoll talked about his interviews with the state's star witness, Carmen Marie Lauber. She is a convicted drug dealer and had worked as a housekeeper for the Richins family. She allegedly confessed to authorities that she supplied Richins with 15 to 30 fentanyl pills on separate occasions, approximately 1 month before Eric's death, and said that Kouri paid her about $900 each time.
All right, so what did she tell you in that first interview about her associations with Kouri Richins?
She confirmed that she had worked for Kouri in the past. She told us that she knew Kouri through Kouri's aunt Doreen, whom Carmen worked for, cleaning houses. She initially stated that she didn't know anything about what had happened with Eric's death or anything about fentanyl. And we explained to her that the position that we were in to try to investigate anything that might have happened, whether that was inculpatory or exculpatory for anyone, and that any information that she might have about it would be helpful to us.
All right, if we just break that down just a little bit, what did she tell you about ever dealing fentanyl at that time?
She said that she hadn't really ever, in her words, messed with fentanyl. Then she later admitted she had tried it once and didn't have a good experience with it.
Did she tell you a daughter had overdosed on fentanyl?
I don't recall. I could review the video and give you an answer on that, but I don't recall.
And isn't it true she told you she never dealt with fentanyl, that she dealt in pain pills and marijuana and other things of that sort?
In the first interview, yes.
And what did you tell her you could do for her if she gave you information about Eric Richins' death or anything that could help you in the investigation of Eric Richins' death?
We explained to her that if she had information regarding Eric Richins' death, that we could work with the prosecutor who was responsible for her charges, for both the search warrant and the drug court charges. We didn't make her any specific promises, but we told her that we were willing to work with the prosecutor's office on those charges.
Yeah, so the defense pressed O'Driscoll about Lauber's possible motive to lie in order to protect herself from being prosecuted. Lauber has a letter of immunity from the U.S. Attorney's Office and is not in custody despite allegedly selling narcotics.
So when you testified before, did you testify as to how many times Ms. Lauber had allegedly provided drugs to Ms. Richins?
I believe so, yes.
And how many times did you say that happened?
At that time of testimony, we understood there to be 3 transactions that Ms. Lauber participated in with Ms. Richins.
And did you interview other people regarding those transactions?
Investigators from the Summit County Sheriff's Office did, yes. I wasn't involved in every single interview, but yes.
Did she tell you how many pills total that she provided to Ms. Richins, or that she recalled providing?
One moment, please. Mr. Wood.
Your Honor, the state produces relevance and objection. What's going on here is the defense counsel is asking questions about the detention hearing, which the defense counsel has a transcript of. Did she tell you this? Well, we know this because he testified to it.
Let's just assume that this question, which goes directly to the probable cause determination, is foundation for whatever's coming next. So I'm going to allow this.
I appreciate it, Your Honor. All these recordings are, all these interviews are recorded in discovery and can be interviewed.
I understand. Your objection to the extent it's the relevance is overruled. Ms. Lewis, please proceed.
Did she tell you a number of pills, the number of pills she provided to Ms. Richins?
Are you meaning in total or per transaction?
Either way, whatever is easiest for you to
She
explain.
made an estimate of approximately 15 to 30 pills per transaction.
So a total of
Maximum of
75, 30 to 90,
30 to 90.
45 to 90 pills. All right. Did you have any of those pills ever been found?
No.
None in the Richins' home,
No.
correct? None in Ms. Richins' car, correct?
No.
So you've never had the opportunity to test any pills that were allegedly provided from Ms. Lauber to Ms. Richins, is that correct?
Correct.
In other words, how do we know these drug deals are real? By the way, when you watch this and you see the arguments from both sides, I think it highlights the importance of great lawyering, right? And how could I talk about great lawyering without mentioning Morgan & Morgan, our sponsor, America's largest injury law firm? You know why they're so big? Because they win a lot. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. Clients get a dedicated team, case investigators, paralegals, customer case specialists. The whole process is so user-friendly too, because from starting your claim to talking to your legal team, it can all be done on your smartphone. There's no upfront fee. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. Now, Detective O'Driscoll admitted that investigators did more interviews in this case, but Kouri Richins had pretty much always been the prime suspect since the beginning.
Besides Kouri Richins, did you interview or investigate into any other possible suspects in this case?
Interview, no. I personally try to keep an open mind as to all possibilities of what could have caused Eric Richins' death. But I didn't conduct interviews with any other suspects that were persons of interest labeled as suspects.
You didn't collect phones or look at anything else from any other suspects, correct?
We collected several phones from involved individuals in this case, and potentially people that could have had access to the Richins home at different times that could give alternate explanations of how the fentanyl got in the system. But I didn't conduct any interviews of individuals regarding their involvement.
By the way, even if this defense argument or line of questioning doesn't persuade the judge here to dismiss the case, it could still be brought up during trial nonetheless. This cross-examination can still be the same thing. And highlighting this previous point once again, the defense pointed out that there's no real way to prove that any pills allegedly sold to Richins by Lauber were actually the drugs that killed Eric.
So as you're sitting here today, Detective, can you say with certainty that the pills that Ms. Lauber allegedly gave to Ms. Richins were the pills that were taken by Eric Richins, or the pills that were taken, if any pills were taken, by Eric Richins?
No.
And as you sit here right now, do you have any idea, like actual knowledge, not an idea, let me rephrase that, do you have any knowledge of how fentanyl got into Mr. Richardson's system?
No.
Mr. Richins' system? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, moving on. After lunch, a cell phone analyst, Christopher Kotradimos, took the stand to talk about what he found on Richins' electronic devices and what wasn't on the phone anymore.
Did you observe a forensic extraction of that phone?
Yes,
And did you analyze that extraction?
I did.
Did you notice any information or data deleted from that phone between January and mid-March of 2022?
Yes.
And can you describe what type of, or types of data have been deleted off that phone?
A lot of data, primarily and most relevant to the investigations in this case, the call logs, texts, web history, and web search.
So when you say that the texts have been deleted, does that mean the entire text threads between different parties?
Yes.
And was it everybody in that time frame, or were there specific people?
Pretty much everybody.
Now you mentioned that web history had been deleted,
Yes.
and was there a specific date that prior to which that web history had been deleted?
Yes, so there on that phone, the web history for that device, that primary device, was basically ended. It picked back up on March 10th of 2022, but prior to that, all of it was gone.
But we know, even if you delete things, like the allegations here, like if you delete text messages, and by the way, arguably the deleting can be more incriminating than even the content of the messages themselves, these messages can usually be recovered. So the state used the cell phone expert's testimony to talk about Robert Grossman. This is the man that Richins was allegedly having an affair with at the time of her husband's death. Grossman was a handyman hired to work on the homes that Richins wanted to flip as part of her real estate business.
Speaking to the defendant's communications with Mr. Grossman, do you recall approximately when those began?
For the 1152 number, which is the first one I'm aware of, it began, I have a trail, basically a digital trail on that phone beginning in November of 2021.
And what was the volume of text calls, anything of that nature, up until March of 2022?
The volume varied depending on the day, but it was pretty much daily communication between the two during that time frame.
And are these phone calls and text messages?
Mostly text, but yes, some phone calls.
So it's fair to say around the time that Mr. Richins passed away, there were ongoing messages between the defendant and Mr. Grossman.
Yes.
And during cross-examination, the defense seemed to try to poke holes in the extraction methods that were used to see the data from the cell phones in this case. After another recess, Brooke Carrington took the stand. Now, she's a forensic accountant who testified during the detention hearing last summer, and she has analyzed hundreds of pages of documentation related to the Richins bank records, life insurance policies, and a prenuptial agreement.
This section states that the business C&E Masonry would retain its character as separate property belonging to the husband.
Even if funds were commingled,
That's correct.
personal and professional? But was there an exception to that?
Yes, if the husband should die prior to the wife, then his interest would transfer to her.
Carrington was also able to testify about changes that were made to Eric's will in the months before he died.
This is an intake form from a divorce attorney describing that Eric Richins was wanting to consult with his attorney on a potential divorce, and it's dated October 8th of 2020.
In the wake of that, are you aware of any other instruments that were created out of that?
Yes, there are the notes that the attorney appeared to have handwritten during the course of that first meeting.
Were there financial arrangements made after that meeting that you're aware of?
Yes, the notes indicate that there was some new information by Mr. Richins that there was the HELOC had been taken out on the home, that as if this was new, and then from this he set up the Eric Richins Living Trust and also a will.
Was there something dramatically different about the trust situation as before?
Ms. Richins was not the beneficiary of his estate. It was to be for his children, and the trustee was going to be his sister, Katie.
Carrington also testified about the life insurance policies taken out on Eric, and the last policy went into effect apparently February 2nd, 2022. Eric died the month later. According to the prosecution, Richins had several communications with the life insurance company to ask why the payout was taking so long. On cross-examination, the defense brought up Eric's trust and whether Richins was actually aware that one existed.
So you don't have personal knowledge, one way or the other, about whether Kouri knew this trust was in place before Eric died?
I cannot testify one way or another about that.
Okay.
Well, more witnesses will take the stand on Tuesday, and once all the evidence is presented, the judge will decide whether or not there is probable cause to finally bring this case to trial. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.